Dr. Vijay, can start, please.
Okay. So we are on live now?
Yes.
Okay. Very good afternoon, Professor Patil, my colleagues and friends.
Good afternoon.
Very warm welcome to today's CTL workshop. Let me introduce Professor Z.N. Patil. Professor Z.N. Patil, currently the President of English Language Teachers Association of India, Pune chapter, holds a very illustrious academic profile. He has been teaching English language and literature at several schools, colleges, institutes, study centers, and universities in India and abroad for 47 years. He retired as Professor of English and head of the Department of Training and Development from English and Foreign Languages University, Hyderabad, India. Since then, he has been freelancing in India and abroad. He did his master's, MPhil, and PhD from Pune University, India. He did a postgraduate certificate in the teaching of English from Central Institute of English and Foreign Languages, now known as English and Foreign Languages University, Hyderabad, India. He was awarded British Council Scholarship in 1990, and he did a diploma and MA in TESOL from the University of Edinburgh, UK. His areas of interest are English language teaching, pragmatics, stylistics, teaching language through literature, teaching English to multilingual and multicultural groups, teaching English to speakers of other languages, using support materials to teach English, employability skills, motivation, classroom management, teacher development, material developments, and new varieties of English. To his credit, Professor Patil has 20 textbooks, 8 resource books, and 80 research articles published in national and international journals. He has successfully guided 10 MPhil and 25 PhD scholars, and presently some more scholars are working under his supervision. He has also evaluated more than 50 PhD theses submitted to Indian and foreign universities. Furthermore, he has delivered 32 invited and sponsored keynote addresses, 78 plenary talks at national and international conferences in the countries Bangladesh, Britain, Canada, China, Dubai, Germany, India, Indonesia, Japan, Korea, Nepal, Oman, Philippines, Sri Lanka, Taiwan, Thailand, and Turkey. In addition, he has contributed to several seminars and conferences as a panel discussant and panel discussion moderator. He was invited to deliver special talks and conduct workshops for the students and teachers in universities in Indonesia, Japan, Korea, Nepal, Singapore, Thailand, UK, and Vietnam. Professor Patil worked as an English language expert on behalf of the Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India, and in this assignment, his job was to develop spoken communication skills of prospective diplomats at the Institute of International Relations, Hanoi, Vietnam, from 1999 to 2002. Later, from 2003 to 2006, he served as Senior English Language Advisor in Japan. In March 2017, he was invited as a visiting research professor by the government of Taiwan for 2 weeks, during which he guided professors from 4 universities in Taichung on various aspects of research in language and literature. He has been a senior advisor to 20 online international journals, such as Asian EFL Journal and its sister journals. He is a founding and executive management member of English Scholars Beyond Borders, an international group which organizes international conferences in various countries and publishes papers in online journals. In recognition of his academic and scholarly contributions and services, he has received Lifetime Membership Award from English Scholars Beyond Border, Outstanding Contribution Award from Rajasthan Association of English Studies, Udaipur, India, Lifetime Achievement Award from North Maharashtra English Teachers Association, India, Emeritus Professor Award from Kanya Mahavidyalaya, Jalandhar, Punjab, India, Best Educationist Award from International Institute of Management and Education, New Delhi, India, and Maharashtra Bhusthan Rajshri Chhatrapati Sahu Maharaj State Level Award for Excellence in Education from Milind Sanstha, Nasik, Maharashtra, India. And above all these, Professor Patil is a very authentic and genuine person. With sincere thanks and appreciation to accept our invitation and deliver this workshop, now I give the floor to Professor Patil to deliver his workshop on basics of research and research methodologies. Very respectfully, now the floor is yours, Professor Patil.
Thank you, Professor Vijay Singh Thakur, and thank you so much for a very elaborate and very long introduction. I don't know whether I deserve this kind of introduction or not, but I'll try to do something today to come up to the mark of that particular introduction. Now, at the very outset, I'd like to express my gratitude to Professor Vijay Singh Thakur, Professor Khalid, Professor Musa, and Professor Abdel for this wonderful opportunity. In fact, it's a matter of pleasure, privilege, and pride for me to interact with Omani teachers, Omani colleagues today on a very important topic, on a very significant topic. Now, I'd like to start my talk on an autobiographical note. Let me tell you at the outset that most of the things that I'm going to discuss today, most of the things that I'm going to share with you today are results of my own observations, my own experience as a teacher, as a researcher, and as a research supervisor, and so on and so forth. You will find very few things which are available in books. So most of my ideas are very simple, and most of my ideas are based on my experience. They are results of my own experience. Now, why am I saying this? As you know, I'm first of all a teacher, and my role as a teacher has taught me several things. What are the things that my role as a teacher has taught me over the years, over the last 47, 48 years? One, my role as a teacher has taught me how to write and how not to write, how to speak and how not to speak. And the other roles that I have played over the last 47 years are the role of the researcher, the role of the research committee member, the role of research supervisor, research evaluator, research paper writer, research paper reviewer, and so on and so forth. Now, all these roles put together have taught me several things. As I pointed out a minute ago, my role as a teacher has taught me how to speak, how to write, how not to speak, how not to write. Hello? 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 Hello, Vijay Kumar ji? Hello? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yes, you can.
Please,
There's a
all the
lot of
participants, please mute your mics.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
people are talking. Yeah, please mute your devices, please. Have you done that?
Yes, sir.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay. So can I start? Hello?
Yes, sir. Can start.
Yeah, I hear some noises in the background. Hello? So a very good afternoon to you, friends. I'm indeed Vijay Kumarji.
Yes, sir. Dr.
Hello.
Subhi. Dr.
Some
Subhi.
people are talking, some women are talking.
Yes, I try make mute for any
Yeah,
staff.
please mute all the mics, Dr.
Okay.
Subhi.
Yes.
Yeah, please.
Everybody. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. So once again, a very good afternoon to you, friends. It's indeed a matter of pleasure and privilege and pride for me to be with you today virtually, though not physically. And I was talking about what my different roles have taught me over the last 46, 47 years. And as I said, I am first of all a teacher. And a teacher learns a lot of things from colleagues. A teacher learns several things from his students, from his trainees, and so on and so forth. So my role as a teacher has taught me a lot of things. For example, my role as a teacher has taught me how to speak and how not to speak, how to write and how not to write, what to write about and what not to write about, what to talk about and what not to talk about. Similarly, I have been working as a researcher. You know, I did my post graduation from the University of Edinburgh, Morehouse College of Education, University of Edinburgh, way back in 1991, and I had to submit a dissertation for my MA. So I did my MA from Edinburgh University. Then I did Master of Philosophy from University of Pune in Maharashtra, India. That was again Master of Philosophy by dissertation. And I did my doctorate in sociolinguistics from the same university, University of Pune, way back in 1988, and so on and so forth. So my role as a teacher has taught me so many things. My role as a researcher at MA level, at Master of Philosophy level, at doctorate level, have taught me different things and lots of things. For several years, I was a research committee member. And when I was sitting on the research committee of different universities, I had to give guidance, and people consulted me on different aspects of research methodologies and so on and so forth. So I'm basically a teacher, but I'm also a researcher. I did my MA by dissertation, MPhil by dissertation, PhD, of course, by dissertation. And as a research committee member, I got some experience regarding research, how to carry out research and how not to carry out research. Then I worked for several years as a research supervisor. As Professor Thakur has already pointed out, I worked as a research supervisor and I successfully guided 10 Master of Philosophy candidates and 25 doctoral candidates. So while I was guiding my Master of Philosophy students and doctorate students, I was learning a lot of things. I was not only teaching my research scholars, but I was learning from them. And I was learning positively, I was learning negatively. So my role as a research supervisor has helped me a lot. Then I have been working as a research evaluator. And as Professor Thakur has already pointed out, I've scrutinized and examined about 50 theses submitted to several universities in India and some universities abroad. So what I'm going to say today, what I'm going to share with you today, is based on my experience as a research supervisor, as a research evaluator or examiner, as a research paper writer. As Professor Thakur pointed out, I have about 80 research articles or papers to my credit. And the process of writing all these 80 research articles or papers has taught me several things. And I'm going to share those things today with you. And it's going to be a very common sense matter. Honestly speaking, I haven't read lots and lots of books on theories, lots and lots of books on research and research methodologies and so on and so forth, because I believe in the utility of wisdom. And what I'm going to share with you today is the wisdom in its distilled form. And this wisdom is a result of my own experience as a teacher, researcher, research committee member, research evaluator, research supervisor, research paper writer, and research paper reviewer. I've reviewed several, dozens and dozens, hundreds of research papers submitted for publication. And the process of reviewing those research papers taught me so many things. Right. Basically, I can talk in terms of binary bifurcation or dichotomy. For example, how to write a research paper, how to write a dissertation, how to write a thesis. That's one side of it. And this is productive experience. How not to write a research paper, how not to write a dissertation or thesis. This is again part of the productive experience. And my reading of research articles and dissertations and doctoral theses and so on and so forth is a part of my receptive experience. And my productive experience and my receptive experience is what I'm going to share with you today. Now, I've tried to divide my talk into three sections or three divisions. The first section is entitled Features of a Good Thesis. Now, what in your opinion are the features or characteristics or qualities of a reasonably good, reasonably fair or fairly good dissertation or thesis or research paper? First of all, there is an intention. The researcher, the research paper writer, the dissertation writer, the thesis writer, the research project writer has an intention, has a purpose, has a goal, has a particular aim. And what could be the goal or aim or purpose? I mean, there could be this purpose or that purpose, this aim or that aim, this goal or that goal. But there is always an intention, there is always a goal, there is always an aim or a purpose. And the aims, the goals, the aims, the purposes, the intentions of the researcher are codified. Or what are the research objectives? Okay, what am I going to do over the next 3 years or so? And why am I undertaking this kind of research? What are my research objectives? What are my hypotheses? And what are my research questions? Incidentally, research questions and hypotheses and research objectives are very closely associated and very closely related. So they are more or less similar things expressed differently, worded differently. So what I'm trying to say right now is that there is always a purpose, an aim, a goal, an intention. Now, in my opinion, in my view, a research paper or thesis or dissertation is an act. What sort of act is it? Is it a physical act? No, it isn't a physical act. Is it a verbal act? Yes, it is a verbal act. Now, there are different types of acts. For example, certain acts are direct speech acts, and certain other acts are indirect speech acts. And a speech act, whether it's a direct one or an indirect one, can be divided into three small steps. For example, when I choose words which I am going to use to express my objectives and hypotheses and questions, when I choose my words to do all these things, I put words together. I use proper words, proper phrases, proper clauses, and proper sentences, and so on and so forth. So combining words into phrases and combining phrases into clauses and combining clauses into sentences or utterances to express my research objectives, research questions, and hypotheses is the locution. This is called in pragmatics or in stylistics, this particular stage of a speech act, a verbal speech act in this case, is locution, that I am using words of the language and phrases of the language and clauses of the language and utterances or sentences of the language to express my objectives and questions and hypotheses. So I'm performing a locutionary act. But Locutionary Act is just the beginning. It's not an end in itself. It's a means. I have to go one step ahead, and I have to perform the second level, the second rung, second stage, act. And the second stage is called Illocutionary Act. Now, when I use words and phrases and clauses and sentences to frame my objectives and questions and hypotheses, right, I am performing the Locutionary Act. But the Locutionary Act has an intention, has a purpose. Why am I combining these words and phrases and clauses? I have a purpose. And the purpose could be to dissuade people, to persuade people, to inform people, to share my knowledge and experience, or to entertain my audience, to instruct my audience, to guide my audience. So that is the illocutionary stage of a speech act. So a thesis, the whole thesis is an act. It's not a physical act. It's a physical act in a very limited sense. I have to use my hands to type whatever research I'm doing. So in that sense, in the sense that I'm typing my thesis, my paper, it's a physical act. I'm using my hands. I'm using the gadgets, the equipment, the apparatus. But that's not the main thing. The main thing is performing a speech act, the verbal speech act, right? And as I said, the speech act can be direct or indirect. Now, do you think it's a good idea for a researcher to have or to use an indirect speech act in research? No, I don't think it's a good idea to be indirect in research. A researcher has to very clearly, very explicitly state, right, the stages to his research and the conclusions and so on and so forth. So a thesis, a dissertation, a research paper is a verbal act. It's a speech act. And it has to be, invariably, it has to be a direct speech act, not an ambiguous speech act, not an indirect speech act. We can be indirect in other cases, but not in case of research, because our aim is to express whatever we know, whatever we want to share with our readers, and so on and so forth. So intention is the first feature of a good thesis, and the intention has to be made very clear. And one way, or one major way, or probably the only way to express clearly the intention of the researcher is to formulate research questions, research objectives, and research hypotheses. That's number one. Number two, acceptance. My intention as a researcher could be 1, 2, 3, 4, this or that or that or that. But that intention, that purpose, that aim, that goal has to be acceptable to my reader. First of all, it has to be acceptable to my supervisor. So I have to write a proposal. I have to write an abstract. And the abstract, the proposal, the hypothesis, the questions, the objectives, all these things, the outline, the chapter scheme, all these things have to be accepted or acceptable to my research supervisor, to my guide, to my research mentor. And, the intention has to be acceptable to the research committee. The research committee may say, no, we are sorry. This is not a very good proposal. We don't think this is a feasible idea or workable, viable idea. So why don't you change your focus? Why don't you change your title? Why don't you change even the area that you are investigating? So my intention as a researcher has to be accepted to my supervisor, to my research subcommittee. And when my product is ready, after a long process, a painful process of investigation, when the dissertation or the thesis or the paper is ready, it has to be accepted by the examiner, evaluator. The evaluator, the examiner may not agree with the researcher in terms of the content, in terms of the organization, in terms of citations, in terms of, let's say, working bibliography and final bibliography, in terms of so many other things, a whole gamut, a whole bunch of things. So my intention has to be acceptable to my supervisor, to the research subcommittee, to the examiner or evaluator, and to the people who are present during my viva voce, the audience, the questioners will object. They will raise questions. They will raise doubts. And I'll have to answer those questions or satisfy those doubts and queries and so on and so forth. So the first quality of a good thesis is intention, and the intention has to be very clearly stated in terms of objectives, questions, and hypotheses. And the second quality is acceptability of my proposal, my abstract, and the acceptability is acceptability at different levels, at the level of the supervisor, at the level of the research committee, at the level of the examiner, the reader, the viva voce audience, and so on and so forth. Right. So the third characteristic or feature of a good thesis is information. What do I mean by information? As a researcher, I need to collect data. I need to collect information, facts, or in some cases, in case of research and literature or language for that matter, the data may be available in the form of different interpretations, right? Different interpretations of the play Othello by Shakespeare, and so on and so forth. So information means here in this context, data, facts, interpretations. If I'm doing empirical research, then I need to carry out or conduct a pre-test and a post-test, and I need to perform an intervention stage, go through an intervention stage and collect data, right? I mean, is there any progress in terms of proficiency, in terms of achievement, in terms of something like that after the intervention period in the experimental group, and so on and so forth. So the data, the information may be available in the form of observation, previous research. So I need to go through, literature review and so on. We'll talk about that later. So intention, a researcher has an intention, has an objective, hypothesis, or research questions. And these things are acceptable to different people, different stakeholders. The third quality is information, which I have explained very briefly. The fourth one is situation. Now, the situation could be local. The situation could be limited to, for example, the university in Salalah, or Dover University. The situation could be local, for example, Dover University situation, or national, it could be a situation applicable to the whole country, Oman, or it could be a global situation. Situation can be local, national, regional, provincial, or international. There has to be some situation. And situation plays a very important role, especially in English language teaching research, right? Now, let me give you the current example. The COVID situation. Is the COVID situation the same in all the countries? No, it isn't. The COVID situation is very grave, very alarming in certain countries like the United States of America, like in European countries, and like in, some other countries like China, maybe. We don't have access to the actual, genuine, authentic data because of the political, ideological reasons and so on and so forth. But the situation in America, the situation in Europe, the situation in China, the situation in India, all these situations, local situations are different. And that's why the infection rate in the United States is different from the infection rate in India, for instance. And why am I talking about this? Because a vaccine which works in one particular climatic condition or in one set of climatic conditions may not work in another set of climatic conditions. So situations plays a very important role. To give you an example from literature, the situation in the poem Daffodils by William Wordsworth is different from the situation in Two Daffodils written by Robert Herrick. The first one, Daffodils by William Wordsworth, portrays a very optimistic situation because the flowers are dancing and fluttering and tossing their heads in sprightly dance and making the poet very happy, making the poet very delighted, right? So that's one kind of situation. The situation in Two Daffodils by Robert Herrick is pessimistic. And therefore, the poet says, "Oh, fair daffodils, we weep to see you fade away so soon." The poet is reminded of the shortness, the brevity of human life. Human life is very brief, very short. Similarly, the life of those daffodil flowers is very short. So the situation could be local, national, global, and so on and so forth. The situation could be limited to this poem and that poem, and so on and so forth. So intention, acceptability of the intention, information that we gather from various sources is the third one. Situation is the fourth one. The context also plays a very important role in research. The context could be local, global. Let me give you the same example: the climatic conditions, genetic factors, healthcare facilities, in terms of treatment of COVID-19 patients, are very important factors in the context. In terms of language teaching or literary analysis, use of synonyms and antonyms and hyponyms and meronyms and word webs, all these are parts of the context. The context in literature could be physical context. Where is the action taking place? When is the action taking place? So the location of the action and the timing of the action are important. They belong to the physical aspect, physical context. When is the action taking place and where is the action taking place, right? That's physical context. Sometimes there is psychological context. I'm giving you an example from literature. So the action in a short story takes place in one particular location, one particular place, and the action takes place at a particular time, on a day or a week, in a week, or so on and so forth. So in the past, we used to talk about unity of action, unity of place, and unity of time, and so on and so forth. So the action takes place in some place at some point in time. That's physical context. The psychological context is important. The mood of the characters. For example, let's take the play Othello by Shakespeare. The mood of Othello before the seed of suspicion is sown in his mind by the supreme villain, Iago, is one type. And his mental frame, his mental condition changes after the seed of suspicion is sown by Iago in his mind. So there is psychological context. Are the characters happy with each other? Are they unhappy with each other? Do they trust each other? And so on and so forth. That's psychological context. And there is a third type of context, which is called linguistic context. If you are considering, for example, a play or a short story or a poem, you will naturally tend to consider things like, synonyms and antonyms and hyponyms and so on and so forth. So there are clues scattered all over the story, scattered all over the play. For example, in the play Othello by Shakespeare, the author, the playwright, uses the word honest several times, I think more than 40 times in the play. And the author uses the word handkerchief several times, nearly 20, 25 times in the play, because the handkerchief plays a very important role in the play and in the marital affiliation of Othello and Desdemona. The handkerchief plays a vital role. And the word honest is very important because we're dealing with marital life of Othello and Desdemona, and we're also dealing with the supreme villain, Iago. Is he honest? According to some people in the play, he is honest. According to some people, he is not honest. So the word honest is used with different senses every time it is used in the context of the play. So linguistic context is very important. Let me give you a simple example. How did it go? Suppose there are two people talking. One day I wanted to use a lift and I was waiting on the 10th floor of the building, and two women had started using the elevator, the lift, from the first floor. And when the lift arrived on the 10th floor, the door opened and I entered the lift and I heard this conversation taking place between two women. How did it go? The second woman said, "Not too bad, but I'm glad it's over." And the first woman said again, was it the last one? And the second woman said, for the time being. I had no idea as to what these two women were talking about, because they had started using the lift from the first floor, and I was waiting for the lift to arrive on the 10th floor. So a lot of things had already happened. The context was already shared between the two women, but the context was not available to me. What were they talking about? I had no idea, no clue, not an iota of clue or idea. So my mind started working. Are these women talking about the delivery of a baby? Or could they be talking about extraction of a tooth? Or could they be talking about an interview or something like that? So in the absence of the context, I was left with so many interpretations. So context plays a very important role in analysis or in research and so on and so forth. Now, when we do research, we need to find information. We refer to one of the characteristics of a good thesis, and that characteristic of a good thesis is information. Information is available in the form of, in various forms in a dissertation, in the form of figures and statistics, data, interpretations, opinions, views, and so on and so forth. So how do we find information? There are primary sources. I don't have to tell you all these things. These are very common sense things. Information is available in primary sources, novels, plays, etc., or in secondary, so in the form of secondary sources, reports, digests, guides, commentaries, criticisms. For example, if somebody is working on Shakespearean tragedies, he or she has to go through the original plays. Many people don't do this. They do research depending wholly or solely on secondary sources, guides, reports, what A.C. Bradley says, what F.R. Lewis says, and so on and so forth, right? What Spurgeon says. So Spurgeon, A.C. Bradley, F.R. Lewis, all these are critics, Shakespearean critics, or critics of Shakespeare. So some people, and unfortunately, this is what is happening across the globe. In many especially in developing countries, there is a lot of intellectual smuggling happening. So I don't read, for example, in the sense, the researcher doesn't go to the original text. He or she goes to texts, written on texts, dissertations or theses written on texts. So what this researcher who goes for shortcuts does is, he or she goes through dissertations, theses, research articles written on that particular topic that he's investigating. But he doesn't go through the original plays or novels or poems and so on and so forth. But what I'm trying to say is that information is available in primary sources, that is novels, plays, etc., or secondary sources, reports, digests, commentaries, guides, or encyclopedias, dictionaries. But the best source of information is the researcher's own knowledge, own ideas, right? For example, if I'm doing research, what I would do right in the beginning is I'll sit down, sit back, relax, and I'll try to recollect whatever I've heard so far, whatever I've read so far, and I'll try to connect different things. I'll try to gather grains of wisdom, grains of ideas from different sources. So my own head, my own memory, my own intellect is the major source of information. I need to tap it. I need to make the best use of whatever is available in my mind, in my brain. Or I can discuss my topic with my family and friends and colleagues and even students and even lay people, laymen, lay women, because they can give me ideas. They may not be doctors, they may not be researchers, but they have lots of wisdom. And wisdom is not a monopoly of researchers. Wisdom can be available anywhere. Even uneducated people, illiterate people, people who cannot read and write can give us brilliant ideas, right? So I can get information in from primary sources, from secondary sources, from encyclopedias, dictionaries. I can excavate my memory, dig out ideas from my own memory, or discuss things with other people, interview them, or I can go through my own books and notebooks or notes. I can go to the library and I can access the author cards, subject cards, title cards, cross-reference cards, etc., etc. So information is available in various forms. Some time ago, I just mentioned, working bibliography and final bibliography. What exactly is the difference between working bibliography and final bibliography? Before I start my actual investigation or research, my exploration, I'd like to make a list of all the books that I think can be relevant to my research or investigation on my topic. And my working bibliography may comprise 200, 500, even 1,000 books. And then, so I have some base, I have a springboard, starting point. And I go through some chapters of some books, or I go through some books from cover to cover, from the first page to the last page. And when my dissertation is ready, my final bibliography is quite short. My working bibliography is quite long, but my final bibliography is quite short. Because my final bibliography, that is my work cited, includes only those books, those articles, those references, which I have actually used in my dissertation, in my text, in the form of quotation, in the form of summaries of views and opinions, and so on and so forth. Okay, so when I start doing my research, when I start my exploration of the topic, I read many articles that I think are relevant, many books that I think are very useful as far as my research is concerned. When I'm reading, what am I doing? Am I just reading? Is it a good idea to just read and read and read? No, it's not a good idea. While I'm reading, I must be taking down notes. And my notes are very cryptic, very brief. They contain only key ideas because I want to remember those ideas and I want to be able to organize those ideas later. So I use note cards or research cards. Now, the advantage of using research cards or notes cards is that I can reshuffle them. I can reorganize them, resequence them. That cannot happen when you're writing in a notebook. You have to tear those pages, right? So research cards or note cards are very important. And we need to write down only one note on one card so that it's easy for you to sequence or resequence those cards easily towards the end of the actual investigation. Right. So research cards, taking notes is a very important process. I mean, it's an instrument of research. Then we need to organize our notes. Notes, there are 3 or 4 different types. Chronological order. When I'm taking down notes, I can follow chronological order. For example, let's say I'm doing research on development of John Keats as a poet over a period of 20 years or 10 years, because Keats died quite young. He died quite young. So let's say I'm doing research on development of William Wordsworth as a poet, as a nature poet over a period of some years. So my notes will exhibit chronological order because I want to talk about the type of poetry that he wrote in his early years, the type of poetry that he wrote or composed in his middle years, and the kind of poetry that he composed in his late years. So my note will be chronological note, or my note can be a logical note. For example, let's say I'm doing research on themes handled by William Wordsworth. So I'll have to talk about William Wordsworth in terms of nuggets. And these nuggets will be thematic nuggets, not chronological nuggets, right? For example, it's quite possible that one particular theme was composed upon in the early years, as well as in the middle years, and also in the final years or late years of his poetic career. So chronology is not important here. The theme is important. So that will be logical order. Sometimes it is logico chronological order, right? It can be a mixture of both, logical and chronological. For example, certain themes of Keats's poems might be characteristics of certain periods, right? And so on. Or it could be psychological order. Chronological order, I'm talking about organizing our notes, research cards. Chronological order, logical order, logico-chronological order, or psychological order. For example, if I'm studying James Joyce or Virginia Woolf or Lawrence Stern, then it's quite likely that my notes will highlight, will focus on, or will exhibit or manifest some sort of psychological order, right? So these things are very important, right? So my brief digression, it's not actually a digression, it's all relevant. My views on finding information and working bibliography and final bibliography and note taking and organizing our notes, all this information is relevant. Let's go back to what we were doing. So what are the qualities of a good thesis? Intention, 1, acceptance, 2, information, 3, situation, 4, context, 5, right? And then we have cohesion and coherence, right? Cohesion and coherence. Where is that? Okay. Okay. What do we understand by cohesion? Cohesion is explicit, overt connections between words, sentences, paragraphs, chapters, and so on. So we need to come up with cohesive paragraphs, cohesive chapters, cohesive sections and subsections. Cohesion is a linguistic notion. Transition markers, tense sequence. Sometimes I'm shocked because there is no grammar. That is, the grammar is, sometimes people send theses or dissertations to me for evaluation, and I'm shocked because the punctuation is faulty, the grammar is defective, spellings are wrong, there is no organization, there is no sequencing of ideas, right? There is nothing. There's nothing, right? So cohesion is very important. Now, E.M. Foster, in Aspects of Novel, makes this distinction very clear, the distinction between one kind of cohesion and another kind of cohesion. For example, he says, the king died, full stop, then the queen died. The word then connects the second sentence to the first sentence. The king died, full stop, then the queen died. So the word then connects the second sentence with the first sentence, right? And this, what sort of connection is this? Is it a causal connection or temporal connection? The word then, it's a temporal connection, right? It suggests that the king's death happened before the queen's death, or the queen's death happened after the king's death. The same thing can be reworded, and the connection can be changed from temporal to causal. The king died, full stop, therefore the queen died. So the queen's death was a consequence of the death of the king. So the word then is a cohesion marker. The word therefore is another cohesion marker. So when we write our paper, when we write our chapters and sections and subsections and so on and so forth, we need to very smoothly transition or move from one paragraph to another paragraph, one chapter to another chapter, and so on and so forth. It should be like a rainbow, that you see several colors merging very naturally, not artificially. So cohesion is important. The next quality of a good thesis is coherence. Coherence happens at the semantic level, at the pragmatic level, or at the semiotic level. For example, let's say there is an old man, and the old man is very fond of chocolates, sweets. One day he buys lots and lots of sweets and keeps those sweets in the refrigerator. And after a day, he goes to the refrigerator and opens it to find no chocolates there, no sweets there. And he says to his daughter, "Where are my chocolates? Where are my sweets?" And the daughter can be very direct. For example, she can say, "I'm sorry, I ate your chocolates or sweets." Very direct answer, direct speech act, very cohesive. But she can be very coherent. That is, apparently it seems that there is no connection between his question and her answer or reply, but there is a hidden connection, semantic connection, pragmatic connection. The girl may say, "Please show me your diet sheet." The father asks the question, "Where are my sweets?" And the daughter answers the question, "Show me your diet sheet." What does she mean? "I'm sorry, Dad, you're not supposed to be eating sweet things. And that's why I've given the sweets to somebody else, or I've eaten them myself, or I've just thrown them away because it's not good for you to eat so many sweet things." So, where are my sweets is a question. And what is the answer? "Show me your diet sheet." This is not a direct answer. This is not an example of cohesion. This is an example of coherence. In order for us to reach the connections between the question and the answer or the reply, we need to go through the process of logical interpretation. The first premise, the second premise, and the conclusion, and so on and so forth. So a good thesis sometimes uses coherence as a strategy. The next quality of good thesis is intertextuality. What do I mean by intertextuality? For example, before I start my actual research, my actual investigation, right? I go through several books which, in my opinion, are relevant to my thesis, to my research investigation. So I do literature review, and I use citations, right? I use quotations from articles from different books and different dissertations and theses, and so on and so forth, right? So what is intertextuality? Let me give you literary examples. T.S. Eliot, in his poem Four Quartets, says about time, "Time future is present in time present, and both time future and time present are present or were present in time past." That is, time future and time present and time past are not compartments. They are not compartments. They are not chunks. They are organic wholes. That is, you cannot separate future from present and future from past, right? Future is an outcome of the present, and the present is an outcome of the past, and both the future and the present are outcomes of the past. That is intertextuality. In genetic terms, intertextuality means something else. For example, before I was born, was I absent? No, I wasn't. I wasn't absent. I was present in the form of genes in my parents. And before my own children were born, were they absent? No, they were not absent. They were present in the form of genes. So my father was yesterday, I am today, and my children are tomorrow. There is a connection between yesterday and today and tomorrow. That is genetic, or there is a connection between one generation and second generation and third generation. That is genetic intertextuality. I gave you the example of T.S. Eliot's temporal connectivity, temporal intertextuality, that past is one text, present is one text, and future is one text. But are these texts separate? No, they are not. They are intertwined, interlinked, interconnected. In fact, they are organically cohesioned or joined. T.S. Eliot has an essay called Tradition and Individual Talent. In this essay, he says that when a particular writer writes a novel or a play or a poem or something, some literary work, he or she changes the tradition. His or her book, novel, play, etc., is a part of the tradition. It's a new thing, but it becomes a part of the tradition. So there is intertextuality between the new novel or play and the earlier novels and plays. It's a tradition, and tradition cannot be described in discrete terms. It's a flow, it's a continuum, right? And so on and so forth. Right. So this is another quality of a good thesis, that when I write the text of my thesis, I refer to different authors, I refer to their agreements, I refer to their disagreements, I refer to their patterns of disagreements, and I position my own views in relation to those agreements and disagreements and interpretations. So this is another kind of intertextuality, right? And intertextuality is exhibited or is manifest, especially in literature review, right? Because you try to find relevance between what you are reading and what you are researching, what you are investigating, and you want to find out the gaps in the research, earlier research, because your hypotheses and your objectives and your research questions will all be based on reading books that you think are reality. Is another quality of good thesis. Intratextuality. That is, within the thesis, I need to see to it that what I have written in the first subsection of the first chapter is cohesive to or with what I have written in the second section or second chapter. So the different paragraphs of a chapter and different chapters of a thesis need to be cohesive, need to be intertwined. There has to be some sort of connectivity. Words, phrases, clauses, sentences, paragraphs, chapters need to be interrelated. And there are devices, transition markers, sentence connectors, paragraph transition markers, or paragraph connectors, and so on. For example, when we are writing the text of our thesis, we say, for example, as we noted in the first chapter on page so and so. So what I'm doing is I'm using co-reference. I'm weaving the texture, I'm weaving the cloth of my research document using different devices. As we saw in the second chapter, as we noted in the second section of the third chapter, as we mentioned in the very first paragraph of the fourth chapter. So these cross-references are very useful, and they make the different parts of the thesis stay together and say things together and pray together and convey messages and meanings together. So intratextuality is very important. Right. Now, coordination between the supervisor and the supervisee is very important, right? Now, let me tell you an anecdote. Once upon a time, there was an old man. One day he went to market and he bought a pair of trousers. When he came home, he realized, excuse me, he noticed that his trousers were rather too long for his height. And he said to himself, oh my goodness, my trousers are rather too long for my height. Now, this was heard by his wife, who was in another room. And this was heard by his daughter, who was in a third room. And the same thing was heard by his daughter-in-law, who was in the fourth room. The man was in one room, his wife was in another room, and his daughter was in a third room, his daughter-in-law was in a fourth room. And what had the man said? The man had said, oh my goodness, my trousers are rather too long for my height, for my size. Now the wife thought that she should trim his trousers by a couple of inches. She did that. But she didn't tell the daughter. She didn't tell the daughter-in-law that she had trimmed the old man's trousers by a couple of inches. His daughter trimmed his trousers by another couple of inches. But she didn't communicate this to her mother or to her sister-in-law. And the sister-in-law on the third day trimmed his trousers by another couple of inches. So by the time this old man's trousers were trimmed by 3 women in the house, it was shorter by 6 inches. And when he wore it, he looked like Charlie Chaplin. This is an example of absence of coordination between the supervisor and the supervisee, right? There is no communication, constant, continual communication between the supervisor and the supervisee. For research, investigation to be on the track, to be on the right path, we need to communicate with each other. We, in the sense, the supervisor and the supervisee, need to communicate with each other on a constant basis, on a continual basis. Now, let's go back to some more qualities. Whatever I write in my paper, every word that I write, every sentence that I write, every paragraph that I write in my research article or paper must be relevant, must be an organic part of the article. I need to question each and every word, each and every sentence, each and every paragraph that I write in my article. Is this sentence indispensable? Can I do away with this paragraph? Can I remove this quotation? And so on and so forth. So I should not provide more information. I should not provide less information. Sometimes I get a thesis which is submitted in 2 volumes of 500 pages each, right? A thesis in 2 parts, and the whole thesis consists of 1,000 pages. Now, this is an example of giving too much information. This gentleman gives too much information because he doesn't have time to trim his thesis, to tighten his thesis. So giving extra, superfluous, redundant, repetitive information, irrelevant information is not a good idea, right? Similarly, giving inadequate, insufficient information or data or argumentation is equally undesirable. So a researcher should give only that much information which is required, which is demanded by the dissertation, by the scope of the dissertation, and so on and so forth, right? So, but in some universities, in several universities, people go by the bulk. So supervisor says, write whatever you want to write, but increase the number of pages. Right? You've written only 200 pages. No, write 500 pages. Write about anything. Right? Write about, now you are doing research on Shakespeare's tragedies. Write about Shakespeare's wife being older than him. Write about the laundry where Shakespeare used to get his clothes washed. If at all he used to get his clothes washed anywhere. Write about anything, but I want you to write 500 pages. This is not a good idea, right? Sometimes the thesis is very short, 100 pages. Sometimes it is very long, 1,000 pages. Both these are extreme points, and we need to avoid these extremes. We need to be reasonably quantitative. Quality is important, but quantity is also important, right? You cannot just submit a thesis consisting of 10 pages. No. I don't know. I'm not sure, but somebody told me that Martin Luther wrote a thesis, a PhD thesis, which consisted of only 18 pages. I don't know. I haven't seen it. I haven't read it. Somebody told me. I haven't verified whether that statement is true or not. But what I'm trying to say is that too little information is a pitfall. Too much information is another pitfall. We need to be somewhere in between, right? Quantity and quality. We need to strike a balance between quantity and quality, right? So how about supporting your own arguments, your own conclusions with examples and evidence? It is very important, especially in empirical research, right? You need to support your argument suppose I say, just imagine that I want to prove that Hamlet is not a tragedy, but a comedy. Now, it's my moral and methodological and pedagogical, right, responsibility to produce textual evidence to support my argument that Hamlet is not a tragedy, but a comedy. I need to produce evidence. I need to support my arguments, my statements, my interpretations with textual evidence, right? Now, for example, let's look at this statement. The intensity of infection, I'm talking about COVID-19, the intensity of infection, the percentage of mortality depends on climatic conditions, genetic factors, age, gender, hygienic habits, healthcare facilities, comorbidity, resistance, racial factors, blood groups, food habits, etc. Now, this is my hypothesis, right? This is my hypothesis. The intensity of infection and the percentage of mortality depend on climatic conditions, genetic factors, age, gender, hygienic habits, healthcare facilities, comorbidity, resistance, racial factors, blood group, food habits, etc. Now, where is the evidence? I have just made a statement, but the statement is not supported. There is no basis for me to make such a statement, such a blatant statement. But if I want to prove my hypothesis, which I have worded in this way, in this form, then I need to go through a whole painful process of getting data, figures, statistics from agencies working in America, in Europe, in Africa, in Australia, in Asia, and then talk about, and the data has to be collected under these categories. Comorbidity, how many patients died because of the fact that they were victims of comorbidity. They had blood pressure, they had diabetes and all that. How many senior citizens, people who are above 60, what was the percentage of people who died, who were above 60 and who died? Right? So I need to collect data for all these factors. Which are these factors? One is intensity of infection. The other one is percentage of mortality, right? And these two things depend, in my opinion, on the following things. One, climatic conditions, hot conditions, tropical countries, very cold countries, right? So climatic conditions. Two, genetic factors, age, young people, what was the percentage of people who died young? Or what was the percentage of young people who died because of infection? What was the percentage of people who were senior citizens and who died because of this? So climatic conditions, genetic factors, age, gender, hygienic habits, and so on and so forth. I must gather data to support my argument. Otherwise, I'll be in deep waters. I'll be in trouble. Right. So to give an example from literature, I can say Othello is a gullible husband, right? Now I make this statement, but then I need to support my statement with evidence from the play, Othello, right? That he very easily succumbs to the machinations of Iago in the play, right? And I need to list all those machinations, examples, instances of machinations, how Iago tells him lies, how many lies he tells Othello, and so on and so forth. So I need to support my my statement, my argument, right? So I need to produce proof, evidence, justification, facts, figures, data, interpretations, and so on and so forth, right? So supporting data, figures, evidence, proof is another quality of this. How about relevance? Sometimes people just dump everything in the thesis irrespective of whether the thing that is dumped into the thesis is relevant or not. Like, for example, I said some time ago, Shakespeare's wife was older than him. So what is the relevance to the investigation? If there is relevance, it's okay. If there is no relevance, why include this particular topic that Shakespeare's wife was older than him? Or Shakespeare used to wash his clothes at this laundry or that laundry. It's far-fetched. There is no connection. If you're talking about an autobiographical play or autobiographical novel or poetry, then you can certainly talk about the life of the poet and the novelist or playwright. There will be some relevance, right? Otherwise, there is no point in including irrelevant information in the thesis just to increase the number of pages, right? Just to make your thesis look big and so on. Right. So relevance, we must therefore, as a researcher, must examine every sentence, every paragraph, every section, every chapter. Is it relevant? Can I drop it? Can I trim it? These are the questions that a researcher needs to ask themselves time and again during the process of investigation. Right. I'm very fond of giving examples from literature, relevant, and I use these examples to illustrate my points. You will not find these examples in any books, but we can always use them to make points, to make your points clearer. For example, in The Solitary Reaper, the poet William Wordsworth says, "Will no one tell me what she sings?" The situation is like this. There is a girl, she is singing a song and she is reaping some crop in the valley, and the poet is listening to the song. But the song is not intelligible. The song is not comprehensible. No, it is intelligible, but it is not comprehensible, not understandable to the poet, because she is singing the song in Gaelic dialect, and he is not very comfortable with Gaelic dialect. He doesn't understand the Gaelic dialect. So he says, "Will no one tell me what she sings?" And this is what happens in the case of many theses. The examiner, the evaluator, feels like asking this question: will somebody help me what this gentleman is trying to say? I'm sorry, I can't understand what he is trying to say. There is so much irrelevant information. There is so much superfluous, redundant, repetitive information, and the focus is lost. It's all blurred. Will no one tell me what she sings? You can change this to suit our requirements, research requirements. Will no one tell me what she says in the thesis? Perhaps the plaintive numbers flow. Plaintive means sad, but we can change it by plenty. Perhaps the plaintive numbers flow. The plenty numbers in the thesis, plenty of words. There's a lot of, it's all but, what is it? It's all sound and fury, signifying nothing. A lot of padding, a lot of wool gathering, a lot of stuff is, injected into the thesis just to make it look bigger and larger. So an examiner may use these lines to express his feelings. Will no one tell me what she sings? Can somebody tell me what the researcher is trying to say? Perhaps the researcher is trying to say these things or those things, right? Or is it some humble lay? Now the researcher tries to create an impression that his or her research is original. But we can say this using these poetic lines. Or is it some humble lay, something humble, something ordinary, nothing extraordinary in the thesis? Familiar matter of today, it's familiar to you, familiar to me, nothing new in the thesis, right? That has been, and maybe again, people have already worked on this, and this gentleman, this lady has worked on the same thing, and maybe again, some people will work on the same topic to just get a degree, and so on and so forth, right? So, right. Now, some time ago, I said that a researcher, a thesis, a research dissertation, or a research paper is an act. It is An illocutionary, it is a locutionary act because the researcher words, phrases his objectives and questions and hypotheses. But there is an illocution, there is an intention behind the objectives and these hypotheses and research questions. And these hypotheses and questions and objectives need to be interpreted by the examiner, by the supervisor, examiner, audience, reader, and so on and so forth. So there is a locution, there is an illocution, there is a perlocution. If you fail to convince the reader, then there is no illocution. Your act is incomplete. Your verbal act, speech act, a direct speech act is a failure because you performed the locution, you expressed your objectives, questions, and hypotheses, and you expressed your intentions, but those intentions are not clear to the reader, to the committee, to the supervisor, to the Viva Watch conductor, and so on. So, a thesis is a speech act. It's a direct speech act. I told you some time ago, I said that it's not a good idea for a researcher to use an indirect speech act in a thesis, in the conclusions, and so on. So I'll narrate a story to make my point clear. Once upon a time, there was a young man. About 22 years ago, he was born in a poor family. His mother was poor. And a year ago, when he was 21, he got married. He got married into a poor family. His mother was poor. His mother-in-law was poor. One day, now please remember, I'm trying to convey a point, and the point will be clear to you towards the end of the narration. And the point is related to this. Can we as researchers be indirect in our thesis? No, we cannot be. We cannot afford to be indirect in our research conclusions. We need to state those conclusions clearly, unambiguously, overtly, clearly, right? So one day this man got up and said to his mother, "Mother, I want to go and see my mother-in-law. I haven't seen her. I haven't seen my mother-in-law. I saw her, I met her only when I got married a year ago." And the mother said, "Okay, my son, you need to go and see your mother-in-law. It's a good idea. She is alone. She is a widow. And your wife, that is my daughter-in-law, is her only child. She doesn't have another daughter. She doesn't have a son. But listen, my son, I have some advice for you. One, don't sit on a low place. You are a son-in-law. Don't sit on a low place." And the son said, "All right, my mom, I'll not sit on a low place." That means, he said to himself, he mumbled to himself, that means I need to sit on a high place. Number two, my son, use weighty words. "All right, mom, I'll use weighty words." And he said to himself, he mumbled to himself, that my mother is asking me to use heavy words, not light words. Okay, mom, I'll not sit on a low place and I'll use weighty words. The next morning, this young man left his village at 8:30 in the morning. And his mother-in-law's village was not very far from his own village. By the time it was 10:30, he could arrive in his mother-in-law's village. The mother-in-law was very, very happy to see the son-in-law. But unfortunately, the old woman had no furniture in the house. She didn't have a sofa set. She didn't have a table and a chair. She didn't even have a teapot. She didn't have even a bed. She used to sleep on the floor on a bamboo mat. So she spread the bamboo mat on the floor and requested the son-in-law to be comfortable. "Please be comfortable." And the young man remembered the first piece of advice given to him by his mother. My mother said, "Don't sit on a low place." And I think this is a low place. I cannot sit on the floor. And he said to his mother-in-law, who was very poor, but who was highly respectable in the village, I'm sorry, I can't sit here. It's a low place. And my mother has advised me to not to sit on a low place. After a minute or two, he saw a heap of dry grass, a haystack, just in front of his house, in front of his mother-in-law's house. He said to himself, ah, that's a high place. And he ran out of the house and mounted up the haystack and sat on top. It was a village, and the whole village gathered around the haystack, around the heap of dry grass in 10 minutes, and people began to whisper. And the mother-in-law came out of the house and requested the son-in-law to go inside the house and sit down comfortably. He said, axe, A-X-E. Axe is an instrument that we use to unfortunately cut down trees, to fell trees, to chop down trees. He said, axe. The mother-in-law requested him again, and he said, hammer. Hammer? H-A-M-M-E-R. And she requested the son-in-law a third time, and he said, grinding stone. In India, we used to use grinding stones in villages in the past. Nowadays, we have flour mill. We have flour mill, right? Every village has a flour mill now. But in those days, excuse me, in those days, there were grinding stones, not flour mills. Right. Now, do you think that the mother-in-law had given explicit, direct instructions or advice? Excuse me. I don't think so. She should have told him, instead of saying, don't sit on a low place, she should have said to him, mind your behavior, mind your conduct. She is your mother-in-law. She is a senior lady. She is a respectable person. So mind your behavior, mind your conduct. And she should have, instead of saying, use weighty words, she should have said, mind your language. But instead of saying, mind your behavior and mind your language, she said something very different. Use, don't sit on a low place and use weighty words. He thought that his mother had asked him to sit on a high place. No, she had not asked him to sit on a high place. She had advised him to mind his conduct, behavior. He thought that his mother had asked him to use words which referred to heavy things, weighty things like axe and hammer and grinding stone. Had she said those words with that intention? No, she had not. But the problem was a real problem, right? So whatever we write in the thesis, in the research article, in the dissertation, has to be unambiguous. It has to be clear, right? So these are four important, we have discussed so many important things, but recently, in the last 10, 15 minutes or 20 minutes, we discussed four important qualities of a good thesis. We should not give unnecessary, superfluous, repetitive, redundant information just to increase the number of pages. Neither should we be too brief. Brevity is the soul of wit, yes, but being too brief is not a good idea, especially in research. So we should not give more information. We should not give less or inadequate information. We should give enough, sufficient, adequate, required information in terms of figures and statistics, data, arguments, interpretations, facts, whatever. Right? Secondly, we should advance supporting evidence or proof for our argument, for our hypothesis, and so on and so forth. We should not just make black and white statements, blanket statements without any support, evidence, proof, justification. These things are important. And thirdly, we should include in our dissertation or thesis only those things which are relevant, even though your dissertation is interdisciplinary. You have taken something from anthropology, sociology, archaeology, phenomenology, linguistics, and literature, and English language teaching. Your topic is interdisciplinary, but that doesn't mean you can dump all kinds of rubbish in the dissertation, in the thesis. No, you can take only relevant things from these disciplines, right? And your thesis should look well knit. The reader should get the impression that not a single word, not a single sentence, not a single paragraph, not even a chapter is irrelevant. Everything is relevant. We as researchers need to put blinkers on our eyes and focus, right? Like in the Indian epic, the Mahabharata, there is a character called Arjun, and there is a test. He has to look into water and hit the eye of the fish that is hanging up there from the ceiling, right? There is the fish hanging from the ceiling, and Arjun, the character in the Mahabharata, has to hit the eye, only the eye of the fish, and he cannot look at the fish hanging from the ceiling. He has to look at the fish reflected in the water and hit the eye. So our thesis should be exactly like that. We should be very focused, right? Like the character in Mahabharata did not see the fins of the fish, or the main body of the fish, or the tail of the fish. He saw only the eye of the fish. He saw nothing else. Similarly, a researcher should see only what is absolutely relevant to his or her purpose, investigative purpose, and should not be distracted, should not be tempted by other things, right? Unnecessary things, right? So just like the mother made her advice very ambiguous, it's not a good idea to make the conclusions ambiguous. Ambiguity is a quality, is a good quality, is an advantage in literature, but ambiguity in legal language, ambiguity in business transactions, ambiguity in research of this kind is not a welcome idea, is not a good thing, right? Now, some people choose their topics, right? And they carry out the research like the lady in this anecdote. There was an old lady, and one day she was looking for her lost keys, but she was looking for her lost keys in the bright and sunny street outside. And some gentleman came, some passerby came and said, "Excuse me, what are you looking for?" And the lady said, "For my lost keys." And the passerby said, "Where did you lose your keys?" And the lady said, "Inside the house." And the man said, "Then why are you looking for the keys here, out in the street?" And the lady said, "Because it's bright and sunny here." This is what happens in the case of some researchers, right? Because they do not want to take pains, because they do not want to go through the painful process of investigating things, questioning things, interrogating things, and checking and cross-checking things. They use a shortcut, right? Because it's easy, it's convenient. So ease and convenience is sometimes a major consideration in research, which is an unfortunate thing. Right. Now, sometimes researchers believe, oh, my notes are ready, my chapter scheme is ready, okay? My hypothesis, my research questions, my research objectives, my synopsis, my abstract, my proposal is ready. I've gone through literature review. My literature review is ready. Now I can finish my thesis in 15 days and submit. it's not as easy as it looks, right? I would like to say what I want to say about this using Robert Frost. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. Let's remember one thing. Our notes are ready, our chapter scheme is ready, our working bibliography is ready, our final bibliography is ready, everything is ready, but that's not the end. There's only half the battle won. The other half remains, because you need to go through so many other stages before you finalize your dissertation or your thesis or your research paper. There are temptations on the way, right? You think your thesis is ready, almost ready, but it's not, right? And some time ago, I spoke about digressing, right? Some people digress a lot. For example, somebody is working on a stylistic analysis of a particular poet. The first chapter talks about poetry in general. The second chapter talks about the place of British poetry in world poetry. The third chapter is about the place of that particular poet in British poetry. The fourth chapter talks about thematic study of his poetry. And the last chapter talks about stylistic study of that. The first, the second, the third, the fourth chapters are not about stylistic analysis. They are about something else. The only chapter that is on stylistic analysis is the fifth chapter, after which there is concluding chapter. Now, do you think this is a good idea? No, it's not a good idea. This is just an example of padding. You want to increase the size, the volume of your thesis. Actually, it should be, out of 5 chapters, 4 chapters should be on, or at least 3 chapters should be on stylistic analysis of those poems, right? But that doesn't happen. Now, what happens in such a case is what happens in The Second Coming by W.B. Yeats. Excuse me. W.B. Yeats in the poem, The Second Coming, says, turning and turning in the widening gyre, there is a gyre, there is a spring, gyre, and God and man in the beginning, maybe thousands and thousands of years ago, man was very close to nature. Man's life was uncontaminated, unpolluted. Man's life was very crystal clear and moral. And man was very close to nature. Man was very close to God, the Creator, the Almighty, the Allah, right? The Ishwar. But then what happened? Turning and turning in the widening gyre. The gyre became wider and wider and wider and wider. And consequently, man could not hear God's call, divine call. In the beginning, man and God were together. So man could hear God's call, divine call. But now, because of materialism, because of industrialization, because of hedonism, man has gone away from God. And God is calling man, but man is not able to hear God's call, divine call. So turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon is a bird, cannot hear the falconer. Falconer here means the man who controls the bird falcon. In this case, God. Falconer is God and falcon is man. Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart. The center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. Sometimes, many times, in fact, not sometimes, many times I receive theses for evaluation, and the situation, the condition of the thesis is exactly like this. Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer, things fall apart, the center cannot hold, mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. That is, in the beginning, the hypotheses are there, the objectives are there, the questions are there, but gradually the researcher goes away, digresses, moves away so far from objectives and objectives and questions and hypotheses that finally you get the impression that the conclusions cannot hear the hypothesis and the questions and the objectives, and vice versa. A lot of digressions are there, right? So this is not a good idea, right? Right. Now, this is the first part. I don't think we can finish all the three parts. We have about half an hour. Not even half an hour. Okay. We have about, yeah, so maybe I'll just quickly go through this. The second sections, the second division.
15 to 20 minutes.
20 minutes, okay. So I have divided my talk into three parts. So I dealt with the first part elaborately. I'll briefly talk about the second part and just skip the last part, right? Which is not, which is important, but not that important. Okay, the second part is stages to the thesis writing. First of all, we need to choose a topic. The researcher can choose the topic, or the researcher's supervisor, the researcher's family members or colleagues or friends can help him or her choose the topic. So topic choice is number one. As soon as the topic is chosen, the researcher needs to get a profile of the topic. What is the nature of the topic? Why have I chosen this topic? How can I deal with this topic? For whom am I doing this exercise? So the topic choice is followed by topic profile. Then we need to collect material, and material is available in the form of human beings. You know, I can find my own ideas, write them down on a piece of paper. I can get ideas from other people or from printed material, books, encyclopedias, dictionaries, Xerox material, audio, visual material, and so on and so forth. So I choose my topic, or my topic is chosen by somebody else for me. Then I get a profile of my topic. Then I collect material from different sources. Then I classify the material. Some material is essential, some material is necessary, and some material is disposable, right? So I need some extra material in my thesis. I may use it, I may not use it, but I will certainly use the essential material, right? So I classify the material into essential, necessary, and disposable, because my research investigation is like a flight. The flight takes off from Salalah and is bound for Muscat, right? The fuel, the petrol that is required for this flight from Salalah to Muscat is, let's say, 100 gallons, just hypothetically, right? And I carry only that much amount of fuel. And suppose there is a thunderstorm in Muscat and the air traffic controller asked me to go back to Salalah. If I don't have extra material, extra fuel, I cannot go back. My fuel is over and there is a possibility of clash, right? So I need to carry some extra material. In addition to essential material, I need to carry necessary material, disposable material. Then I need to systematize my material into, for example, introduction, discussion, and conclusion. I need to divide it into, it's like a pyramid. Introduction, discussion, conclusion. It's like a triangle or pyramid. So I need to systematize my material. That is my next stage. Then I need to present. Before I present, I need to ask myself so many questions. Number one, I'll just rapidly read these questions. Have I defined the research purpose clearly? Does my research reflect the purpose? Have I expressed my own views or just quoted other people's views? Have I presented convincing and adequate arguments in support of my views? Have I backed my statements with specific evidence and examples? Have I organized information properly? Are my introduction and conclusions clear? Have I forged links between arguments? Have I signposted transition from paragraph to paragraph, chapter to chapter? Is the style clear and grammatical? Is the punctuation correct? You know, unfortunately, these days we receive theses for evaluation which are full of mistakes. Grammar mistakes, spelling mistakes, collocation mistakes, organizational mistakes, punctuation mistakes, and mistakes of all kinds. Sometimes you find 15, 20, 30 mistakes on a single page. It's all rubbish. And you have to reject the thesis or ask the candidate to revise it and resubmit it, right? So is the punctuation correct? Is the wording tight and economical? Are there any surplus examples? Is there any waffle or redundancy? Are summaries, quotations, footnote references, final bibliography accurate? Is the form of the bibliography consistent? MLA style sheet and APA style sheet and all that? Is the language appropriate? Is it highfalutin? Have I organized and proportioned my introduction, discussion, main body, and conclusion? And so on. And the last question, the last item is questions and answers. Now, before I after I submit my dissertation, I can anticipate questions. Okay, I start preparing myself for my viva voce after the reports arrive. So I read the thesis section by section, and on every section, I anticipate some 5 questions. And I try to answer those questions to myself as part of a rehearsal at home, right? So some questions can be anticipated by the researcher himself or herself. Some questions can be pointed out by his or her colleague or friend or family member. And then there will be questions raised by the evaluators or examiners and questions raised by the audience during the viva voce, and so on and so forth. Right. Now, since we have about 20 minutes, Professor Thakur?
Maybe, sir, 10 minutes?
I can take 10 minutes more?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, the last question is, the last division is, what are the functions of the following things? Title. A title should be precise. A title should reflect the focus of the thesis, the investigation. It should summarize the main idea, describe the topic. It should be catchy and brief. It should be attention-getting, attention-arresting. It should not be too long. It should not be too short. Abstract. Usually there is a word limit for abstract, and it informs and attracts. It also talks briefly about methodology and results and implications. Introduction in the thesis. It's an elaboration of the title and the abstract. It describes the importance of the topic and theoretical implications and relation to previous work and so on and so forth. Literature review. I briefly talked about literature review some time ago. We have a working bibliography, and we go through some of those titles and take notes and review those titles and try to find out gaps in the previous research, previous literature. And on the basis of the gap, we formulate our hypotheses and questions and objectives. So literature review is a very important stage. All right, research questions, hypotheses are very important. Discussion should highlight consequences of results. Discussion in the thesis is a very important part, right? Conclusions are important. References, of course, are important, and so on and so forth. Now, as far as the language is concerned, there are differences. Some people say we should not use the first person pronoun I. I chose this topic because I like this, or I formulated the hypothesis, I formulated the research questions, or I went through, I read, I browsed through so many books and articles. So some people say we should try to avoid the use of the first person pronoun I, right? But I don't agree with those people. I'm sorry to say that. Now, I am the researcher. What difference does it make whether I say I chose the topic or the researcher chose the topic? Sometimes I find it very funny that I'm trying to separate myself as a person from myself as a researcher. Now, can you really separate the researcher from the person? No, you cannot. It is like separating the dance from the dancer. When you are watching a dance performance, you cannot really separate the dance from the dancer. You cannot say this is the dance and this is the dancer, and there is no connection between the dance and the dancer. No, it's not like that. The dance performance is an expression of the total personality, physical, emotional, intellectual, social personality of the dancer. Similarly, I don't see the point in avoiding the reference to I. That I is very important. It doesn't mean the researcher is full of ego. The researcher is very proud. No. Secondly, I usually advise my researchees or researchers or supervisees to use short sentences. In my opinion, any sentence that is beyond 20 words is undesirable. A good length sentence consists of 17, 18, 19, 20 words. And I ask my supervisees to use active voice constructions, not passive voice constructions. Sometimes passive voice constructions are essential. I'm not denying their usefulness. But in other cases, it's a good idea to use active sentences and avoid passive sentences. It's a good idea to use verbs in preference to nouns. Verbs are more reader friendly than nouns. Active sentences are more reader friendly than passive sentences. The word I is more reader friendly than the word researcher. So the language also plays a very important role, especially in literary research, in linguistic research, and English language teaching research, and so on and so forth. That's all I wanted to say. I'm sorry, was I very fast? Did I speak very fast, Professor Thakur? Maybe.
No, it was okay, sir. Good.
But I thought that I was being a little fast.
Yeah, towards the end.
Towards the end.
Otherwise, it was okay. It was not too rapid.
Okay.
Yeah.
I hope our participants could catch up with me, because
Yes,
they all
sir.
specialize in English. Most of them specialize in English, right?
No, it's a mixed audience from all colleges. But yes, majority are from
English.
English, education, and foundation program. People are from
but
different.
they have English. They understand English.
Yeah, they do. They do.
Non-technical English, and that's why I tried to make it non-technical.
Yes, sir. So thank you
Thank
very
you.
much, sir, for highly
You're
informative,
welcome.
very rich, very simple presentation on a very useful topic, basics of research and research methodologies, because there is a lot to say, but almost you covered everything. And here I was looking at chat. Looks like you didn't leave any gap. So there are many questions, in fact.
Okay.
There were some 62 participants.
Uh-huh.
There were some comments. There was one comment from Dr. Naima, and she appreciated
Naima.
a lot. Yeah, Naima is there.
Naima is there. Oh, Naima, thank you so much.
Well, how could I miss this, Zeden? You know, how could I miss this?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm honored. I
She
feel
said,
honored.
these lived experiences of research and developing knowledge is great. And then people like all practical examples that you use to support, relevance, quantity, quality. So many people appreciated that. Only one suggestion came in the beginning, somewhere, from Dr. Abdul Qadir. And he wanted you to highlight the hybrid research approach or design or methodology.
Okay.
We wanted some input on that. So if you can say briefly on.
Probably next time we can do that.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, because I would like to handle questions which everyone can understand in the audience.
Yeah.
And you told me that many teachers come from Arabic background.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
they may not be familiar with technical jargon. That's one reason why I avoided using qualitative, quantitative, modern language association, MLA, and American psychological, what is that, APA association and all. Yeah, and pre-taste and post-taste. I didn't talk about all those things. I just mentioned pre-taste and post-taste once when I was talking about data collection or statistics or figures and facts and all that. Thank you. If there are any non-technical questions, common sense questions, you can always.
No, there are no questions.
Sir, I would like to add something, if you permit me,
there
please.
is one question.
Please.
There is one question from Dr. Musa now.
Musa, okay.
Yeah, and his question is, what is the appropriate form of research that would help teachers to deal with classroom challenges?
Form?
Yeah, what kind of research, in what form, suitable form or appropriate form of research that would help teachers to deal with classroom challenges?
Okay, in that case, I would say that classroom action research, right? Action research which goes on a continual basis inside the classroom goes a long way in improving classroom performance of the teacher and the taught, the teacher and the learners. So the teacher can maintain a diary, maintain a portfolio, and record his or her observations, record his or her success stories and failure stories, so that these success stories and failure stories, these pluses and minuses can help him or her in altering or modifying his teaching strategies and approach and method and all that. So I think action research in the classroom action research is an appropriate tool to improve classroom performance of learners and teachers. Thank you.
Yes, Dr. Adil?
Yes. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
first of all, I think I'm audible to everyone.
Yes, we can hear.
Yes. Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Vijay for inviting me to this conference. And it is because of his invitation only that I have been able to listen to you. As a matter of fact, I have been an ex-faculty of Dhofar University, and now I am in Crescent University in Chennai now.
Oh, you're in Chennai?
Yes, I am Chennai now.
Oh, wonderful. Do you Bhaskaran Nair, Hindustan University?
No, I am in Chennai, this Crescent University.
Okay. Please go ahead.
Yes. It is almost 1 year that I have come over here, and now I'm guiding researchers or two researchers also. So what I feel now, there is no question. I'm simply sharing my thoughts with you.
Wonderful.
Yes. What I see now, maybe during my college days, when I was doing MA, I just read about in literary criticism William Amson's 7 ambiguities. And those 7 ambiguities, I find just prevailing. 7 types of ambiguities.
Yes.
And all those ambiguities now I find in the current research work. The students, as far as the different characteristics that you just talked about, like intention must be there, acceptability must be there, information must be there, and all these things are there, but there is no language.
There is no
the language of the researchers in the present time, it is just missing.
Very shabby.
Yes. So I'm not just able to find out that what is the reason. What I feel at this moment, that maybe these students of English literature, they have not read so well. Because what I believe that if there is no reading, then if there is no, if there is no reading, then the productive skills are also not coming out. So just a moment, somebody is at my door. Just a moment. Okay, please continue.
Hello.
Shakta, yes.
Hello.
Yes, I am there.
Yeah. So is your comment over?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor, for your comments, and your comments are very valid. In fact, I couldn't agree more. I'm absolutely in agreement with you. These days, if there are mistakes, suppose there are mistakes in a thesis in physics, thesis on physics or chemistry, we understand. The mistakes are mistakes and they are not forgivable. But in science, you can just connive at them, just ignore them. But in a thesis on literature, in a thesis on English language teaching, in a thesis on linguistics, there are horrible mistakes of grammar and spelling and punctuation and organization, and all sorts of mistakes and errors are there. This is unforgivable. I agree with you.
Yes, coherence, cohesiveness that you were talking about, the unity and connection between the two sentences are completely missing. And I'm very afraid to edit any research work.
Same is true here. These days, I've started saying no. Sorry, I'm not free, and I'm not eligible to evaluate these theses.
Yes,
I'm
doctor,
sorry.
Yes, because once you edit a research work, that is your name goes with it.
Exactly.
Yes, and
thank you.
To what extent we can just edit it?
Yeah. There is a lot of rehash, cut and paste, duplication, and very little genuine and authentic research is happening in India.
Correct, sir.
I can say this about India. I cannot say this about other countries. But in India, 90% of research in humanities and social sciences is nothing but duplication. I agree.
Can I request Naima to get in? Because Naima is giving one or two good suggestions to Musa's question related to teachers' challenges, research on that. Okay. Please, Naima.
Yes, sure. Here I am. Yeah. Sorry, could I just hear the question again so I can focus my answer better? Oops, I shouldn't have this background. This is from a previous webinar. Sorry about that.
No, Naima, Musa said, what sort of research is suitable in the context of improving classroom challenges or overcoming classroom challenges?
Because you mentioned two sources. That is why I requested you.
Thank you. Yes. So Anne Burns actually has been working for decades now, supporting teachers do action research. So she gives good procedures. And as you said, Professor Patel, it's that research cycle, it's that continuous cycle. So in terms of investigating classroom problems, my top 3 tips are for teachers to work with a partner. So, work with another teacher in your school or your university or your college. And then, frame your research question very carefully.
Right.
Identify the problem. What is it that you want to investigate? And don't go rushing into solutions. It's very important to understand the problem first.
Right.
Often research is about pinning down the problem. The solutions kind of come much later. And here, Professor Patel, what you said about context, the situation, is so important to describe what is around the problem, very, very clearly. So 3 top tips. First of all, work with a partner. Secondly, describe the situation and the problem as clearly as you can. And you will find that you will change your description as you work through your research. And the third thing is have a clear plan.
Right.
You can go and get research training, but in terms of project management, have a clear plan and have a clear endpoint. You know, research is very seductive. One can go on researching forever, but you know, make sure that you set yourself an endpoint in terms of time and meet that endpoint, even if you feel that you want to do more. So that's very, very important. But yes, there are those sources, and I'll also put another source in the chat box, because that is that gives us very good examples of what you know, living research by teachers is like. It's Cambridge research papers, and they're freely available. It's like a journal, freely available on the Cambridge website. You know, you don't have to pay for that. So as teachers, if you go and look at that and read 1 or 2 papers, very, very helpful. And I'm from Leeds Beckett. Let me explain. This is, you know, my background is from a previous webinar I did for Indonesia. Okay. Okay, so I don't want to take up a lot of time, but yes, yes, start that journey.
Classroom research is the main thing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Naima.
It's almost time. We can take one more question. Dr. Abdur Rahman wants to come in. So please, Abdur Rahman. Please get in and ask.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vijay. Greetings to everyone, and welcome, Prof. Patil.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
For the informative presentation and thought-provoking delivery.
Thank you so much.
I have a quick question concerning online research.
On
online research.
Online research. Okay.
Online research. Yes. So we are now in the pandemic time. How can teachers benefit from this, you know, crisis-driven time in conducting online research? Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you so much for a very good question. In fact, this is a blessing in disguise. This pandemic is a blessing in disguise. Before the pandemic, we didn't actually interact with other colleagues working in our domain, in our area. But this is an opportunity, and we can share our views, share our problems, share our desire for solution, and so on and so forth, because each one of us is a unique teacher. You are a unique teacher. I am a unique teacher. My experiences, my background, my point of view, right? My situation and your situation, your point of view, your background, all these things are different. And a lot of give and take is possible in this situation, in online context. And we never used to do that earlier, before the pandemic struck us, you know. So yes, online resources are readily available now. There are so many webinars, and these webinars are very good platforms to share problems and also solutions, whatever solutions are available, and talk about research research avenues, research possibilities, you know, whether research that is being carried out in different countries is valid or reliable or not, and so on and so forth. Yes, so online resources are useful, yes, though there are limitations. Thank you.
And all the attendees, there is a feedback form on the chat, in the chat box. So please quickly fill that feedback form and you will get your certificate instantly. So please take few minutes.
So
fill that form.
Yeah, I must thank my friends and colleagues, Dr. Vijay Singh Thakur, Professor Thakur, and Professor Khalid, and Professor Musa, Professor Abdel, and other colleagues for this wonderful opportunity. Thank you so much. And it was a privilege, it was a pride and pleasure sharing ideas with you. And it was a great experience. And the added one more feather in the cap is the presence and comments from Naima.
Yes,
thank you, Zed. And it's just always so lovely to join talks with you and our, you know, Scholars Beyond Borders.
And your session for English Language Teachers Association of India Pune chapter was very well received. The feedback was excellent. And Vijay Singh's, Professor Thakur's session as well was very well received. Thank you so much. We still talk about your session and Vijay Singh Thakur's session. We keep talking. Thank you so much. And hopefully see you in Dhofar in October, hopefully, God willing.
Yeah, next Saturday, she will be doing a session for us.
Oh, great.
Same
great.
time, same day.
Wonderful. I'll be there. And what is the topic?
I'm looking forward to that. I'm going to share some insights and practicalities on assessment.
Oh, wonderful.
So yes, I'm really looking forward to that.
Great, great. I'll be there Saturday.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Professor Thakur and other colleagues for this wonderful opportunity. It was great seeing you on the screen, at least, though not in person. Hopefully see you soon.
Yeah, hopefully we'll meet soon.
So this will be available on YouTube.
Professor Roger is there.
Yeah.
Oh, Roger.
Yeah. I was just going to say that. And Roger has put in a very useful link in the chat box. So, but I think it's just come to me.
Yeah.
Yes, I tried to put it into the chat. Yeah, I was just listening.
Roger, can you send the link to me as well, please, on WhatsApp?
Yeah, I will do. I thought I sent it to everybody, but maybe Naima can. I'm just on my iPhone here, so cutting and pasting isn't as simple. But yeah. It was just an audio video file to do with practitioner research, which involves again the lady that Naima was talking about, plus Mark Wyatt, one of my former colleagues. They have a session on practitioner research, classroom research, which I think could also answer that question that Naima was addressing. So, yeah.
Okay. And yesterday, Professor Bhaskaran Nair called me and said that your session for LTIF was very good, academic writing.
Thanks.
And
yes.
your session, the same session was done by you for LTI Pune chapter. That was also very well received on academic
it was
writing.
a slightly different topic, but it was similar. Yeah, something similar. Yes, thanks. Yes.
Overlapping somewhere. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So good. Nice to see you and nice to hear you.
Nice to see you too, Vijay. Hopefully see you live rather than just on screen one of these days.
Well, next week.
We don't know when that's going to happen yet, do we? So.
Yeah, we're desperate to meet in person, all of us.
I think in Dhofar in October it's going to work, isn't it, Vijay?
I think so.
More likely to work.
Yeah.
Yeah, one more year, and I think things will be absolutely normal. Should be.
Hopefully, vaccinations and so on will come in, because we're. We've been working confined to our home for since March now. But anyway, that's life. Yeah.
And Professor Roger, next week Naima is doing her session, and I think after that, next to that, we will have your session.
Yes, that's right. I the 19th or something like that. Yeah, I'm ready. Yeah. Okay.
Dr. Vijay, can I say something here?
Yeah, please.
I would like to thank Prof. Battle, Prof. Rogers, and Prof. Naima. Thank you very much for sharing with us your experience and having joined activities together and tasks. And this will add another value to and another importance to the rest of Dhofar team, and hopefully inshallah we will have a very closer communication and very positive collaboration soon.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, all of you. Thank you. And also Dr. Vijay, thank you very much that you again for, having that kind of bridge again between, Dhofar University and the rest of those, wonderful colleagues. Thank you very much.
Yeah, in fact, we have enjoyed talks by Professor Musa, Professor Khalid, Professor Thakur, Professor Roger Nunn, Professor Naima Han, Professor Sivakumar Siv Subramaniam, and all great speakers, wonderful speakers, each one unique speaker, very effective, all of us.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
So I think we can say goodbye now.
Yeah, I think we can. We can just leave the meeting now.
Yeah, we can leave. Thank you so much. And have a very good
Professor Thakur, will this be available? Will this be available on Facebook or YouTube or where?
YouTube, it is there. I can send the link later.
Okay. Please do that. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you, Naima. Thank you, Roger.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye, Prof. Thank you a lot.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.